Welcome to Museum Rat. I am your host, Doug Y. I'm coming to you from the beautiful Pasadena Media Studios, broadcast on the Arroyo Channel here in Pasadena, California. I have been in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Last episode, we looked at Georgia O'Keeffe. Now we are going to look at some contemporary artists who are working in Santa Fe, who certainly have a lineage back to Georgia O'Keeffe. Before we do that, I wanted to talk about Meow Wolf. So I went and saw, if you haven't heard about Meow Wolf, they're an experiential installation company. And they started as an artist collective of like 13 people living in an apartment. And eventually they convince George R.R. Martin of Game of Thrones fame to buy them a dilapidated bowling alley so that they can install this huge experience. They allow you to take pictures, but they ask that you not broadcast pictures, the interior of the installation, so that everybody can experience the wonder of it for themselves in the moment. I will always gladly respect if a gallery or a place asks for me to not take photos or to not broadcast those photos. But I do want to say just quickly about Meow Wolf. For one thing, now they have, 200 some odd employees. They're opening the show in Las Vegas. They have a show in Las Vegas, a new show in Las Vegas that's opening this year. Then another show in Denver. This type of experiential product, experience that competes with going to a movie or going to see a concert or whatever. This is going to be a larger and larger part of our entertainment landscape in the 21st century. And there were things that the group at Meow Wolf did. I had a wonderful talk with some of the employees. There are things that they are doing. There's a depth of design when you have people walking through something where they can touch everything and go through every drawer. There's a depth of design required to that is new. In film and TV, you design for the shot. But if somebody can go through the entire house and read every book, there's a depth required that is just coming online in the 21st century, a new depth of production design. We have got to get started. So I was at the Wheelwright Museum, and the show, as much as I wanted to see Georgia O'Keeffe and Meow Wolf, the show that really brought me to Santa Fe was the work of Rose B. Simpson. The show was called Lit. The concept was that she was being lit from the inside, the inner fire. Very interesting artist. These are both self-portraits. When she's a part of the Pueblo tribe, and you can see that in her traditional dress in Prayer from 2014, which is the white figure, and Genesis is 2017. These are both self-portraits of the same person made within 3 years of each other. She has a very interesting backstory. You have her mother, who at a very young age, when she had young children, renounced money as a concept that it was corrupting and poisonous, and she got rid of it in their lives. They raised all of their own food and slaughtered their own animals. Rose Simpson talks about going to the dump with her family to collect tires, to make shoes for themselves, and she has stuck with this fascination of post-apocalyptic theory, of systems of civilization faltering at a certain point, and the natural world coming to bear on human civilization. These are both self-portraits, and I think what's interesting about them is they're not just representational of the physical form, right? They are also about identity and belief. This is the same human being within 3 years, and this is how differently she feels inside. Transformative. This is called Ancestor Number 1. Now, interesting thing about Rose Simpson, Ancestor Number 2, is she studied at RISD. She went to the Rhode Island School of Design, one of the best art schools in the world. And she has two techniques at play here. One is a traditional coil and scrape technique, where you, the viewer at the end, wow, love this piece, love this piece. This is called Self-Portrait from 2016. You have two styles. One is the coil and scrape, where it's very smooth at the end. You see no process. The other is a slab technique of sculpture, which is really made famous or brought to prominence by Alberto Giacometti, who we will look at in the episode about Vancouver, because I just saw a wonderful show of Alberto Giacometti, a retrospective, at the Vancouver Art Gallery. So this self-portrait here is about the creation of her daughter. Literally the creation of her daughter. She said that it felt as if her body transformed into a machine. Quote, "After I was human again, it was the building of the baby that felt like my body was out of control, like a 69 Chevelle going full speed, and my brain was a deflated balloon hanging off the rear bumper." Powerful. She does a lot of these. This is directed South 1. She does a lot of post-apocalyptic warriors. This is Reclamation. This piece, along with Reclamation 2 and another sculpture that we'll look at called Special, are about sexual violence against indigenous women. A real terrible problem. Directed Center. And so you're in this museum, the wheelwright. It's really dark. The main gallery is a circle, and there are just these spotlights on these individual pieces. Excuse me. So you have these massive ancestor heads and all of these characters with these very interesting souls. They're all facing completely to the center point of the entire thing. Keep that in mind, how many self-portraits there are, how many fantasy self-portraits there are, and what ends up being at the center of the entire show. This is called Directed West. Ancestor 3, and Ancestor 4. This piece is called Doll, D-O-L-L. Just the concept of a doll, what it means, the abstraction here, all of these things being claimed and reused. You know, one of the things that Rose Simpson talks a lot about, there was a really fascinating video where she's building something, and she has a piece of leather strip, and she's binding her work and building out this form. And she says, you know, this was somebody. And then she puts her hand on a metal table, and she says, this is metal. It was still somebody. Everything here had a life before me, that things have lived and died, that even a rock in a mountain has a life, maybe even has a name, maybe even has an internal life, is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing, exactly where it's supposed to be doing it. And that things have lived and died, have been planted and harvested every day for eternity, for the people who are here today to be here, to exist. And it's something that she carries with her a lot. This is called Great Lengths. This is a tall man. He's, I don't know, he's like Kareem. He's like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He's like a 7'1", 7'2", and he's got this big tall ladder behind him. Cairn, C-A-I-R-N. It's an old Gaelic word. It means a man-made pile of stones as a memorial or a landmark. Again, she is marking the creation of her daughter, Cedar. Reclamation 2. Ancestor 7, followed by Special. This is also about sexual violence against indigenous women. The marks on the body, the graffiti on the body, the concept of graffiti written onto a person. And the scrape coil technique, a classic Pueblo technique being used in the sculpture there. Directed north, followed by Secret of Flight. Powerful to stand in front of these figures. They really do feel like they're looking at you. Ancestor 5. Ancestor 4. These are massive, by the way. These are 4 feet by 4 feet by 3 feet, 5, yeah, about 4 feet by 3 feet. They're big. They're really big. Difficult to create. This is a single piece. It's called The Answer That Ended Creation B. Then you take all of this, all of those pieces, all of those characters, all of those faces, they're all staring to a single point in the center of this dark room where this small, beautiful sculpture called Baby waits. It is also a self-portrait. It is not of her daughter, it is of herself. Just the constant consideration of identity is something that Rose Simpson, and transforming her identity over and over and over again. And in the way that she talks about it, you know, sometimes not even by choice, but there are deep, powerful forces inside of her that kick on in all of these different ways. And she spends a lot of time considering that. As I said, young. I think she is one of the important artists of our time. I think that you can draw a direct lineage to actually Giacometti, the idea of existentialist sculpture, the search for meaning in sculpture, and Georgia O'Keeffe. I think that Rose B. Simpson, if I were the marketing guy, I would pull this one. Is it so dignified that she's holding a huge bottom? There she is in her studio considering reclamation. There she is with Kareem. See, that's how you guard Kareem. That's how you guard against the skyhook. You got to get right up on him. You don't give him an inch. You don't give him the baseline. That's how you beat Kareem. That's good defense. That's good defense. Look at this. I mean, what a boss. How do you not see Georgia O'Keeffe in that picture? You know, I mean, she really does feel like the second coming of Georgia O'Keeffe, and whatever American modernism will be moving forward, I do believe that Rose B. Simpson is one of our most powerful artists. Living artists, and pay attention to her over the course of her and yours and our lives. Next, we're going to be looking at Judy Twaletstiwa. Judy Twaletstiwa? Yes, Judy Twaletstiwa. I had to ask, but now I say it with a lot of confidence, and I try and slip it into as many conversations as possible. I can Judy Twaletstiwa, you can Judy Twaletstiwa. I mean, it comes out of a holster now. I had trouble with it at first. Her show was The Dream Life of Objects. Again, this idea of internal lives of things, that everything is sacred. It is impossible to make something that isn't sacred. Even when we think of stuff like plastic. Plastic comes from every living thing that's ever existed on this planet, and all of those lives. You know, it is impossible in these theories that these artists are putting forth, that everything is sacred, absolutely everything. You cannot get away from it. That perhaps the spiritual part of life is actually the only part of life. Started with these. She worked with two wonderful artists, Mary Cavanaugh and Matthew McMillan, on the cast here of my hands, but wow, every wrinkle, the richness of the color, beautiful piece. This is the dream life of objects. So perhaps, this is what your sofa thinks about, what your refrigerator thinks about. Maybe it still holds memories of the lives that the metal and leather and cloth, led before. Very interesting piece here. This is called Continued Painting number 3. So she took a 72 by 48 inch canvas and over 6 months painted every day with what she said were no externalized voices of criticism. She just would go experience the image as it was the day before, add to it, iterate, play with it, combine her presence and the image to create something new, take a picture of it. She said that taking a photograph approximates the presence of a painting. And then you see the entire process. And what I think is so interesting about this, it resolves and changes. It's representational, and then it goes completely abstract, right? There's like a tall giraffe and a robot, and then within a couple of days it becomes a spaceman. She takes all of these pictures, and it goes completely abstract. The presence of the piece changes, and every day she is working with the same picture. She's coming to the same canvas. And this is it in the end. After 6 months, she said, under the final coat of red paint lay unintentional reminders of the buried images and traces of what once was. The painting has a memory. The dream life of objects. The painting has a memory. And when she looks at it, she sees things she remembers putting there. So she applies her memory to it. I find that really fascinating. I find that a really, really interesting explanation. It's a beautiful metaphor for memory itself. Moving on, she goes and she collects a number of pieces from her personal life. Things that this was, she wrote a settler's diary when she was 12 years old for school and included it. Individual pieces, some of them having a lot to do with her Jewish heritage. These are both sands from Iwo Jima, which she brings up later in her glasswork. This was a Nazi armband that her grandmother kept, and whenever she would visit her grandmother would pull this band out and tell her to never forget, to think about it. And in this same space of the dream life of objects, if the things that we dream about us, do the evil things that we have nightmares about have nightmares about us or think about us? It's a difficult, scary question. Then we get into The Crow. This is from 2006, and it really was a piece that leveled me. She found a dead crow on the street, on the side of the highway, and to her it was sacred. That it had not lost any beauty, any potency. In death, it had simply stopped moving and stopped thinking, although there may be memory inside of it. And she took it home and she harvested it. She plucked every feather. She cleaned the skin. She took out the organs. She boiled it and kept the bones. and then created 25 of these compositions made of this bird. And to her point, a dead bird by the side of the road had a massive impact on this artist. The artist then takes it home, makes it into something else, puts it on the wall to explain to people her theories about the nature of things being sacred, that it never goes away. And now this bird and the bird's body affected me, and now is inside this television show, and I am sharing it with you. Wow, that is a lot of power. There is a lot of power inside of these things, inside of choices, inside of taking action, right? These kinds of object to art, you don't run into all the time in normal, I won't call it normal, in a modern context. But you find your way out to places like Santa Fe, and you go find studio artists who are thinking about time and honor in new and old and ancient ways. And it broadens your horizon. Just the idea, the profundity of how much this bird has done, the impact that this bird has had on the world since being, since dying, has stayed with me. I think about it constantly. That is a crow's heart. Have you ever seen a crow's heart? I haven't. And then you look at it and it looks like a human heart. Isn't that wild? We move into text shards number 1. Her point here, she said there was a lot of commentary, and I liked that. She gave a lot of context for her own work. She said, we measure our day from sunrise to sunset, but what if a day were 1,000,000 years? Could we hear the heartbeat of a rock? Are we frozen temporally in our experience of time so that we cannot feel the living nature of everything around us? I don't know. And she does very primitive glass work, so it's almost still granular. You can almost still feel the sand. It's very brittle, multiple colors, and again, the individual grains of sand become the glass. The individual pieces of glass become this picture, and all of the different memories and lives that all of this rock and heat and color have experienced before being brought together. Shards 4. It is not. And again, you have in this detail, right, the whole and the broken separate, right? The shattered version of it is true, and yet it is also a whole composition. The grain of sand exists, and yet it is part of glass. The duality of individual and all is something that she plays with a lot. It's something that she's interested in. Okay, this one is you gotta hold on, and I'm going to give you the context to these pieces because it's a very interesting path that brings her to making these. In 1993, Judy Twaletstiwa, yes, Judy Twaletstiwa, had an experience with a Black Salvation Army Santa Claus in New York City on 5th Avenue and 54th Street. She then had a dream about the interaction, and I have no other information about it. I just said an interaction at the gallery. She painted 20 paintings about it. Then she had her assistant design the Santa Claus suit that she painted, created a pattern for that. right? So you have this idea of something that was sacred and unique, a dream, being turned into a pattern, something replicated. Then she has another dream, which was a combination of two other things. She was in 2016, she listened to a group of 5 Eastern European nuns create an extemporaneous song in Florence, Italy. And she also saw an exchange between a homeless man and a baby on 8th Avenue. And the combination of those things produced this series of things going from unique and sacred and dreamlike to concrete and patterned. And these are pieces from the Santa Claus suit and a simplicity pattern for a baby's christening gown. On glass adhesive. Text shards, number 2. Followed by my hands again, just, oh, wonderful. And then we get into divination. She sets these pieces as memories and says, what did victim, perpetrator, and bystander choose to see in the years leading up to and during the Holocaust? I create these and I picture someone selecting a different piece to hold every day, staring silently into it. They would listen for the elusive and truthful voice of the unconscious.